Hello and welcome to another Starcraft 2 commentary, being presented by Colonel Barker. We're here on the map Cloud Kingdom, and we've got a game between Elfi as our red Protoss player and Moonglade as our blue Zerg player. So, Elfi versus Moonglade, Moonglade versus Elfi, Cloud Kingdom map. Bit of silliness because there's not a huge amount of talk about in the early part of the game, apart from often what I previously commented on. So, on this map, we can only spawn, I believe, in the cross-positional positions. So, it's interesting that Elfi is going out for a very, very, very quick scout, even though he knows where the opponent's going to be. I suspect it's just to potentially perform a bit of harass if Moonglade, I must get these names right, if Moonglade decides to go for a very quick expansion, but I don't think that's on the cards. I think knowing these kind of games, Moonglade is going to come up with a spawning pool in order to get some Zerglings to prevent any kinds of harass, because these Protoss players do love their cannon harass at various expansions and other stuff. Meanwhile, Elfi coming out with a pylon, so probably followed by a forge. Speak of it, here's a forge, followed by an expansion, so just your standard forge fast expand. Nothing too funny. Now, it's interesting looking at the metagame in terms of most Protoss players seem to go with this forge fast expand these days. And there's nothing wrong with that, that's good, but a Zerg player will always want to have one more base, one more hatchery on top of one more mining base really on top of their Protoss or their Terran opponents. And by the Terran and Protoss players always expanding out, doing a forge fast expand or a one Rex expand, it forces the Zerg player to always come out with 3 bases. Pretty much always come up with 3 bases. It's very difficult for, and I don't think I've seen this, a Zerg player deciding to play only with one base play. It's not quite the same as a Terran player or a Protoss player that can do some one game action, so to speak. Speaking of, here comes his expansion, and the first expansion for Moonglade, which I imagine is going to be very, very quickly followed up by a 3rd expansion. I imagine that's what this is doing. This little dronette. Now, I'd like to emphasize, I don't watch these expansions. I don't watch these games at all. Yep, and he's going to be there for the very, very, very fast 3rd expansion. I don't tend to watch these games before because I feel it's a bit like cheating, and I feel like I'm sort of just recounting something which I've seen slightly far ahead of it. Slightly ahead of what's actually happening, and I don't think that's particularly fun. And also, I like that excitement of having no idea what's happening. So, Forge Fast Expand that's being blocked off by a Photon Cannon and a Gateway, and that will just prevent too many Speedling run-bys, although I think there may be a slight gap here. And then Cybercore, that's interesting. Now, I think around this stage, or in a minute or so, Elfi is perhaps going to drop down a bunch more gateways. Perhaps. Here comes some probes just to help saturate that base. And expansion, the hatchery on its way out. Down comes some more drones. I mean, I do feel sorry for the poor Zerg players, because having to come up with 3 expansions within 5 minutes, or 4 minutes 30 or whatever it is, that really doesn't necessarily put them behind, but it's a lot more work initially than, say, the Protoss player or the Terran player have to do. But the advantage, of course, being once they get to that stage where they have those 3 bases, they are sitting on an arse ton of minerals and can reinforce their armies very, very, very quickly indeed. Out comes a little Zergling, just checking out various expansions. And, of course, the Zergling sitting in the 3rd base expansion for the Protoss player Elfi. Because, of course, Elfi knows that there's going to be a very, very quick, fast 3rd expansion for Moonglade. He's going to want to know if he decides to take advantage of that. God, that was a complicated way of saying it. Oh, well, I'll find a better way. Knowing what the other player is going to do, is someone going to deviate from that, knowing that that's what the other player is going to do? It's difficult. Now, There am I talking nonsense over a Stargate with a Phoenix coming in. However, that has been spotted by an Overlord, a sacrificial Overlord, which is about to get zapped, I'd imagine. I mean, oh, alas, poor Overlord, but certainly worth it. One of the advantages of the Overlords, of course, is that it gives you that full vision. Now, 2 more gateways coming out, so putting him on a total of 3 gates. That's not a huge amount for 7 minutes in, but some Stalker harass. The Stalker's already got 1 kill, so I imagine that was a Zergling. Up to 2 kills. Now, knowing that the Stalker's come through and taken that out, I suspect that Moonglade suspects... I suspect that Moonglade suspects that there is an expansion coming out very, very shortly from our Protoss player. And I would not be at all surprised by that. Down comes the Phoenix, having a bit of a peruse of what's going on. And meanwhile, having spotted that that the air units are coming, there are 3 spawn crawlers coming down. I imagine we're going to have, what, 1 at each base? 1 spawn crawler. Yep. Then 1 on each base, and that's just going to prevent too much harass. However, there's quite a bit of mobilization happening here. Zerglings coming from every single direction. And in response, pylon, a couple of photon cannons coming down, which is what going to want to do anyway if he wants to block off this area. Zergling coming in, taking out those poor sentries. Oh no. Protoss player very, very quickly drops down a gateway. Elfi, poor Elfi. However, I don't think that gateway is going to last. Nope, there it goes, gone. It's not great. It's not a great feeling at all to see Zerglings in the main taking out the probes. I know what they're called. Why can't we have 1 unit, not just probes, drones, and SCVs? And of course, talking about drones all the time gives you too much of an advantage to make jokes about my droning voice. However, Zerglings taken care of. A handful of here sitting just outside the photon cannon. Oh, look at that. 10 kills, that's not bad. I think he's just sitting there judging, trying to spot how far away he can sit. And out comes that 3rd expansion with a bucket load, well, 3 photon cannons. I suppose those Zerglings didn't stand much of a chance, they couldn't retreat. However, Zergling mobilization coming out, the 4 sitting here, I think that should be enough to hold them, hold those Zerglings back for a little while. However, if we have a look, 2 more expansions, 1 more expansion coming here, and a macro hatch sitting in 3rd position. And that's just going to be used primarily for lava, or larvae. 4 Phoenixes popping along, but due to those spore crawlers, they're not going to have a happy time whatsoever. They're just running by, getting some scouting information. So Roach Warren Infestation Pit. Most Zerg players do love their Roach aggression, because they're reasonably long range, they're very strong, heavy, you know, slightly expensive, but on the other hand, they're nice and durable. And a durable unit's a good unit. Now, what these Phoenixes need to do is actually spot all these Zerglings, because if they do, the poor Zerglings can do nothing but run. So 4 spines being placed down. That's just going to prevent, not spines, spine crawlers being laid down. That's just going to prevent stalkers or zealots running down, because of course a handful of zealots can take out a hatchery in absolutely no time whatsoever. Lifting up a drone, taking it out. There's not been terribly efficient. Well, 3 kills, 2 kills, 1 kill, and 2 kills. Yeah, okay, you know, that's reasonable. It's just enough to frustrate the Zerg player. Out comes that Spire and Colossus. Now, Colossus is what you need to take on Zerglings. Lots of Zerglings. Lots of Zerglings. All day, all of the time. So both players just focusing on macroing up as fast as they can. So we've got melee attack coming out. We've got the extended thermal lance, ground level, weapons level 2. I think both players are really looking at going into the long game. Neither seems to be deciding to push out in a particularly strong manner, so we're just hitting 3 gates. 3 gates, it's not very heavy for a few minutes in. And speaking of, here's another 5. 1 up there, and we have the Robo Bay. We've got a fleet beacon. Now this is epic. First couple of games I played, absolutely epic. After that, we've gone to sort of much more macro level focus game, but we have Blink coming out, we have a Mothership coming out. This is getting exciting. This is getting very, very exciting. Mothership's basically the most exciting thing that can happen in all of Starcraft, other than a nuclear launch. Spine crawlers coming everywhere, and a arse ton of roaches, infestors. I think Moonglade is powering up, ready for a push. He's sitting at 181, as to poor Elfi's 138, and even more spines. I think he's expecting a large push, a stalker push, and I don't think a large stalker push is coming. I mean, there are a number of stalkers, but I don't think that's the kind of thing. And oh, Elfi going for a 4th base. Interesting. I suppose the advantage is that 4th base can be defended here, and that then goes on and defends his 3rd base and 2nd base, as long as he can defend at this position here. And that's going to be the tricky thing. And I suspect that's where Moonglade is going to push. If he does decide to push, he's going to push through here. The trouble is, of course, he needs to take out all these buildings, but if he does, that's quite a number of the warp gates down, quite a number of the forges down. On the other hand, which is, you know, where the upgrades come from, particularly if they're destroyed midway through the upgrades. Out we come with double assimilators. Ooh. Getting exciting indeed. 3 more photon cannons here, sitting reasonably air heavy. 1-2 upgrades. And here come speedlings, corruptors, roaches, infestors. Here sits everything, and a mothership. On the other hand, those corruptors will make very, very, very short work of the mothership. It's already half down, 1/3 down, 1/4 down, and destroyed. There goes the mothership. Had a second mothership on its way out immediately. It's a very strong Protoss force to face, and he's doing a reasonable job taking up those Zerg. I suspect the problem is the Zerg player decided. The Zerg player, I should use his name. The trouble is that Moonglade decided to take up that mothership, you know, with good reason, very, very early on, rather than focusing down the actual army itself. He did manage to take down the Colossus, take down the mothership, you know, the main thing, but there were a lot of stalkers, and there still are. There are a ton of stalkers. Out coming a bit of a Zergling push. Now, I think this would be an ideal time for Elfi to take out and harass one of these bases, because, of course, I suppose in terms of bases, they're both sitting about equal, which of course means Moonglade is slightly behind in this case. So Protoss player sitting at 170 supply, as is Moonglade. However, a very, very, very sneaky expansion coming out here. Knowing he's slightly behind, I think Moonglade's like, oh, we'd best come out with another expansion then. So that's massive, massive stalker force on its way down. Mothership coming down. I mean, once the mothership is there to support the stalkers, they just become that much more powerful and that much more effective. This expansion is in a very, very vulnerable position. If Elfi spots it, he could take it out in absolutely no time whatsoever. Absolutely no time. On the other hand, I think he's just content on sitting back and macroing up. Ground armor, shield level 2, more Colossus, Archons, which will be helped to use on that Archon toilet. And Moonglade just looking out for a potential another expansion, and actually, rather than keeping an eye out for that, Elfi is just pushing. It's just pushing straight forward. Now out here we have, what, 8 Broodlords, incredibly, incredibly effective, particularly against Stalkers. And Elfi taking out the destructible terrain. Both players now sitting at supply cap, so we're going to see a battle, and I think that battle is possibly going to decide the rest of the game. The Zerg player, Moonglade, as per normal, floating a lot of, well, not for Moonglade, but just for Zerg players, floating a lot of minerals. As soon as they hit that 200 200 cap, they start to float a lot of minerals very, very quickly. And that's just advantageous because they can very, very quickly reinforce their army in no time at all. So how many gateways we're sitting? We're sitting at, oh my, 10, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18 gateways. So Elfi can also very quickly, Elfi can very quickly reinforce his virtually entire army in no time at all. Now here comes that Archon toilet, as mentioned before, which is just that vortex. Send your troops in, which are about to pop out and then be electrified. Which is also fantastic for protecting you. So there's Broodlords being pushed back. Broodlords just so very effective. 178, 198. This is the trouble. Zerg players can reinforce their army in no time at all. The Blink Stalker's blinking up underneath the Broodlords, and that's their main weakness. It feels like Moonglade is on a bit of a back foot at the moment. On the other hand, he's floating so many more minerals, and he can just afford to reinforce. And even though he seems to be on the back foot, being pushed out further and further, that mothership being taken out, I believe, while I was talking, he can very quickly reinforce his army, moving himself up to 200. Now just coming up with a ton of Zerglings, always good to transition forces. And a bunch of High Templar sitting at home. Exactly for this kind of push. I think he was expecting. Now, interesting. I hadn't even noticed this. I need to pay more attention. Elfi coming up with his own secret expansion to match Moonglade's, and Moonglade is using that seemingly primarily just for those larvae, because he doesn't currently need any more minerals. I think he has plenty. 156 for Protoss for Elfi, and 181 for Moonglade. Those Stalkers so effective at knocking out static defenses. And those Broodlords looking terribly depressed. The Stalkers need to watch out. They'll be able to take out the Broodlords in no time whatsoever, which is depressing because those Broodlords are tremendously expensive. Out, another mothership is coming. He's sticking mothership heavy. Ground armor level 3 coming out, and 6 more corruptors. Now, what am I missing? So, Protoss army pretty much taken out down to 108 supply, which I imagine is going to be largely probes, but that's okay. He needs those probes. Both floating around about the same mineral. On the other hand, the Zerg army currently sitting around 150, so he's going to take this opportunity to push, coming with as many Zerglings as is possible. Archon's knocking out a bunch. I think Elfi's going to want to put up those cannons again as soon as possible. Those cannons so fantastic at preventing Zergling harass. On the other hand, I was going to say by now we should be sitting at 3-3, but 1-2 at 25 minutes in, that's not fantastic. He's not been really keeping up those upgrades, considering how many minerals he's currently been floating. So finally, Phoenix spots the expansion. A whole bunch of Zealots taking out the expansion in no time at all. Sadly, he wasn't using that for resource gathering. The 4th expansion has been taken out. I think Elfi may have this. I don't want to call it, because I've seen Zerg players come out from these kind of positions in no time at all. But just sticking Broodlord, and that's not really, I mean, it's okay at Stalkers, but it's not really ideal, especially against Archons. Archons, motherships, coming in for a push. I mean, if those Broodlords, which are so terribly slow, could come along and knock out the resource line here, they could do massive damage in no time whatsoever. On the other hand, that's part of the problem with having such a slow, large, lumbering, heavy force, is that you can't, if you went out to try and take out this expansion, I believe he could with when he's got there, he could not get back to defend himself. And I think this might be enough to call the GG. Just throwing that out there. Just throwing it out there. Archon's knocking down the units. I'm surprised Elfi hasn't decided to try and go for this expansion. On the other hand, there's almost no mining here. There's literally no mining there. A tiny amount of mining here. Actually, am I right in believing this is Moonglade's only mining base? And without those hatcheries, he won't be able to reinforce his army. So we've got Elfi sitting at 187 and Moonglade down to 91 and calling the GG. He has lost too much and he just doesn't have enough minerals. Look how saturated that is. Maybe 40 drones on a handful of patches. And apparently, even though he's called the GG, he'd Elfi decides to continue just to take out those hatcheries. Okay, well, thank you very much for watching. This has been an exciting, epic game. Any game with a mothership I consider to be particularly epic. I hope you've enjoyed this game, and if you have, and if you're not already, please subscribe and like the video. It's very important to me that you like the video, purely for financial, selfish reasons. Cheers, thank you very much.